Hi, everyone. Thank you. Changing the game. I love double entendres. My name is Gabe. I am the game director on Cyberpunk 2077 after launch and Phantom Liberty and VP at CD PROJEKT RED. What does a game director do? We'll get into some of that later, but basically a vision conductor, sort of a team coach, and kind of an ROI manager, where to put resources for what features and content and stuff for making the best game possible. We'll start with this quote. What a quote. I agree. We came out stronger when we went through the trenches together and turning around the product, and I'm gonna try to kind of capture that as best I can in 20 or so minutes. I can certainly talk for hours about it, but I'm gonna do some highlights kind of based on what the team's perspective was, and then afterwards kind of give you kind of a more abstract layer perspective that I have on it. And to kind of get you there, I want to set the stage, the atmosphere a little bit after launch. For my colleagues and friends in America, we've been through various different game launches and suffered some good launches, some bad launches, and there's some trauma that happens with it. In Poland, I lived there, and it was a little different. It was tough. It's tough to kind of capture and explain like the CD PROJEKT RED is a big part of sort of a pop culture export. There it is on the spire in Warsaw. The presence is everywhere. And maybe the best way I can kind of capture it is with an anecdote or two. So my shower head was broken, and I went to my landlord, and I'm like, hey, or I messaged my landlord. I'm like, I'd like for it to get fixed. Can you send someone out? No one showed up. Eventually, some weeks later, I go to the landlord's office, and I'm like, hey, Simon, what's going on? Are you sending someone? And he's like, you work at CD PROJEKT RED, don't you? I'm like, yes. He's like, I bought Cyberpunk. I'm like, oh, okay. And he's like, I have a PlayStation 4. I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, and then I was so caught off guard, I just start rambling about, yes, we got the, some memory management, about streaming in. I start talking about all this technical stuff, and I'm like, we're working on it. And he's like, and then I turn back around, and I'm like, so yeah, about getting that repair guy on. He's like, we're working on it. I'm like, all right. So there's your headline, right? And of course, as I kind of had the cliche American experience moving to Europe, I'm like, I'm gonna learn a new language. And I would go to the coffee shop, the bakery, in between lockdowns and stuff like that. And I'd go in there and be like, hi, I'd like a cappuccino. And then the lady wouldn't speak English with me. She'd be like, dzień dobry. And I'd be, oh, dzień dobry, dzień dobry. And so she'd practice English or practice Polish with me, be cappuccino, proszę. And one day, after lunch, I come to get my coffee, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have a good day. I'm gonna go to this. She's like, and she never spoke English with me. And then the first time, she's like, CD Projekt, what happened? And we can laugh about it now, and it's great. But if you kind of take it back to the colleagues, the sort of kids out of college, their first job, working on this for 4 or 5 years, and you've got the pressures, the trauma in the office, but also out of the office. Your friends kind of asking you like, how you doing? People on the street. That was the setting. It was a lot, weight in and out of the office. There was a lot of external negative and trauma overall. So the first order of business was to motivate. And I had been through some rough launches in the past myself, so my heart went out to everyone. And my sort of first order of business, I wanted to focus on the good. So I was leaning in, like, the density, the world, just how much detail there is in it. Appreciate that. That's great. Yes, we've got things to fix, but this is good. The story, the things that you guys dared to do with the story, unlike anything else, this is good. And of course, the big thing to motivate, what are all kind of game devs a sucker for, is ideas. So we started talking about ideas, and I'll kind of start there to kind of frame it. So we approached it when we were, leaning into kind of address the stuff that led up to 2.0. Of course, we didn't kind of brand it 2.0 then, as well as Phantom Liberty. We kind of approached it with a kind of sequel mindset. Like, what are the things that we loved, and what are kind of the things we want to iterate on? And I kind of summarize it here into kind of 4 umbrella bullet points of ideas, but there was a lot of ideas floating around and kind of just getting everyone excited about. And one was, when you approach Night City, when you approach Cyberpunk, and there's cyberware in the world, what do you want to do? If you got gorilla arms, what does the player want to do? Do they want to pick people up and throw them? Yes, let's do that. If you have a katana blade and you got Sandavista, do you want to block bullets with your katana blade? Yes, let's do that. Let's focus on the sort of expectations, the things the players are going to. Let's do this, and kind of getting everyone excited about that. The other kind of big umbrella of ideas that we were getting excited about at the beginning was a believable world. As I was mentioning, and those of you who played, at launch and thereafter, the kind of layers of environment storytelling, the details, so dense. And now let's kind of give extra layers of life to it. Let's add believable things. Let's have people kind of interacting and other agents in the world other than just V. Which is to say the player would do stuff, but let's see, like in Dogtown, for example, the guy rolling it was a weapons dealer. So weapons deals are going on without you. Let's see that in the world. Let's see that in life. Criminals, they do crimes without waiting for V to interact. Let's do that. Let's focus on that and getting everyone rallied around that. V's purpose, this is another one, or the player's purpose. We're getting rallied around this idea. If we wanted to make sure that whatever we set you off to do, for example, if you're out to rescue the president, if you dilly-dally, you go elsewhere, you don't rescue the president, well, the president dies, right? The president dies. Let's see that consequence. Let's see the world go on without it. Let's focus on these kind of things. Getting everyone excited about these kind of like iteration ideas, if you will, on our approach and narrative. As well as V kind of makes choices throughout the journey with Reed and Songbird, let's have, Johnny be affected. Let's have, of course, Reed and Songbird be affected, their character arcs. If you go with Songbird, if you empathize with Songbird, maybe Reed or Johnny starts to see that she's a survivor and he maybe wasn't trying to survive. Maybe he was too self-destructive. If you go with Reed, who is, a man of principles, but his principles, he wanted to be true, but maybe they weren't and they were damaging people around him, then maybe Johnny starts to think about, like, hey, was I hurting the people around me? Let's see V's choices, V's experience affect Johnny, affect Reed, affect Songbird, getting people excited around this idea. And then RPG cohesion. So to me, like the cornerstones of RPG are story, character progression, exploration, and combat. So let's try to make sure that whatever we do in our gameplay and our narrative, they kind of work together, they supplement. What emotions are we trying to achieve in these moments? Let's have all 4 of these things kind of supplement them. So this, I try to give a brief overview of kind of where we're going with our head as we're getting rallied and kind of motivating everyone to get in. How are we going to do it? So transform. You probably heard some of the materials of like we went through a transformation. There's so many layers of talking about this. I certainly can't cover it all in 20 minutes, so I'm going to try to cover some of the high points. And as most things, when you're trying to improve kind of process, teams working together, communication, right? Communication is always a big one. So we focused on that. And then ownership, giving people the power to be able to make decisions, to solve problems without having to wait for a game director or someone else to kind of give the blessing in all ways. There's a lot of, it sounds easier, but easier said than done. Let's walk through it. There's some nuance to it, of course. Now, previously, we had it set up where it's like you got, team of quest designers, team of level designers, team of environment artists, and they worked in their groups with their lead or their director, and like a quest designer might be like, okay, we need in this area a bar for this scene. So I request it to concept, I request it to environment art, level design, and it goes through like Jira and stuff like that. Now, on a smaller teams, this can maybe work when you have the communication, everyone's kind of close, but as you are bigger and bigger, you're kind of separated. And by the time that bar comes around and the cinematic designer wants to work with it, there's not enough room between the stools for the staging, right? I can't do this thing I wanted to do with the bartender kind of lifting the leaf or jumping over because all of this, didn't follow in the JIRA as it came around. So instead, let's organize the teams. So we set up teams, content and feature teams with cross-discipline together to work together and kind of own areas and pieces of content and features. Now, I'm not gonna like rose-colored glasses as in like, and that's it, and then everything was solved. No, there's nuance and tricks. For example, you go from one kind of group that's doing one quest and another, and is Songbird the same? Is she cocky here, and is she softer here? Is the gameplay, too difficult here, too hard here? So everyone has sort of, and then some of the people on the team might be introverts versus extroverts, and so some of the disciplines might get more weight than others in different things that they were working on. So, of course, how do you manage this? Well, okay, the game director, right? Got to get in there and make sure that, the voices are heard if someone's an introvert. If the writer isn't speaking up and the level designer is, sort of tease it out. If the sort of arc of the character, or we want to set up Songbird to look more empathetic towards the beginning. So spoilers, by the way. If at this point you haven't played it, it's too late, right? So, spoilers. So if we want to make it that Songbird's more sort of like caring and empathetic to you and your plight, so that she's more believable and trusting, so you don't kind of see that she's kind of behind some of this stuff. Okay, sure. Game director can do that stuff, but at scale, and those of you who've like played the game, just thousands and thousands of design decisions, right? Hundreds per week. It's impossible. So and the game director can be a real big bottleneck. So alignment and ownership, there's a lot going on this page here, and I'll try to, I'm gonna take some time with it. So what we did is essentially kind of try to duplicate the game director and empower people to do stuff that the game director would do in different areas. And we kind of had different product areas that we split up, if you will. We had the narrative area, the gameplay area, and World Sandbox and the Art Center. We also had some others to deal with specific stuff. And we put a product owner, an area product owner in each one that then would be able to kind of make those calls. Now, the trick, of course, is that if one area product owner is making a call and it disagrees, like if the narrative product owner wants to make a call about something with the art or the time of day and the scene, and it kind of conflicts with something that maybe the art director has in mind, alignment. Alignment is a key, right? So you're all kind of on the same page and you understand the pillars and the vision and the intention of different areas. So APO makes calls about like a game director, and we might know the what's, like the stuff I explained before, but we got to know like the whys, and we got to get together. So how did we resolve this stuff? Well, the kind of tricks of the trade. We got together and we did sort of jams together. We reviewed things together, and then the APOs would go out and do the actual kind of sprint reviews as the tasks get done. The team started to do stuff and deliver stuff. The APOs would make calls and be able to say, okay, approved, and they can move on with their iteration. And hopefully that APO has the kind of gameplay in mind, the art in mind of the narrative. Same thing with World Sandbox, keeping all that stuff in mind. And that was because before those reviews, we would try to get together and do our reviews together. We'd play games to kind of do comparisons and stuff like that. So, because there's thousands of emergent calls, as I was saying all the time. So this formula, like kind of, or it's not on the screen, but yeah. So this setup is aspirational and it's sort of illustrative. We weren't always in this form, but the idea was to kind of distribute ownership, empower people, and make sure that we got aligned. And the producers, being a partner in every area, would help with the managing of tasks, with the overall kind of like making sure that everyone was getting together and seeing if there's a misalignment on something, kind of raising the hand for everyone, bringing my attention to it. And I would let all these different APOs kind of make their calls. I would have certain things that I would really get into and I would sort of want to get into the weeds on, just kind of some through lines, critical stuffs. But the idea was to kind of empower people and let them do their stuff and kind of use the combined talents. And this, you know, it sounds like aspirational and hopeful, but I think it was a big part of contributing to being able to kind of manage the quality on such a large scale product. Another thing I would mention is that when we try to get the cross-discipline teams together and we try to get one of every discipline in, that wasn't always feasible, right? Might not have enough audio designers for every single content team, might not have enough you know, concept artists to go around. And so in some cases, we would have them as kind of separate resource teams, still in that kind of waterfall way, if you will. And in some cases, we would have them floating in between. So again, aspirational model, but the idea, the principle, the heart was alignment and ownership. We also had the discipline leads, I should mention as well. They're kind of down there in the middle. So the discipline leads would make sure that the kind of quality of, for example, level design from one area to the other, the kind of quality of the gameplay from one area to the other, the environment, the quality. They would be like the quality checks, the kind of hows, as opposed to necessarily the whats that sat with the APOs and the POs. Now, as we got a rhythm with this, on that sort of top level of me and the APOs, then the APOs over time started to kind of designate product owners to let them and be empowered and make calls in the kind of smaller cross-discipline groups. And the other thing is, like, no matter how much effort you put in to align and get on the same page, and I think we had a great chemistry with the APOs and me, and we were able to kind of have the same kind of goals and hopes and wishes, no matter how much, there's still going to be misalignment. And so one of the tricks that we kind of did is we just scheduled, like me and the executive producer, we would schedule in misalignment. We would schedule in like, okay, make your calls in the area in the sprint reviews, but I might come along and see that it doesn't kind of match up with maybe some of the other areas and we don't have that cohesion of the product, so we're going to have to change some of it. And I would do it kind of in an audible way of just kind of knowing and getting a sense of which APOs were more aligned on certain topics than others. And so we would schedule in 10%, 20% of calls and things like that to maybe have to go back and iterate on. The other thing this was really helpful with, this kind of format, was to mitigate the, and I say 10 and 20%, putting all the effort into alignment and letting people do the stuff, that sense of ownership being motivating, but also just having to reduce the amount of times of going back and redoing stuff, which also can hit morale. So doing it this way, we felt we had a much better momentum of not having to do as much kind of miscommunication rework, but instead you know, save on that. So I think that helped a lot as well. All right, I'm running out of time. So we did a kind of a retrospective afterwards, and we got the team together, and you know, everyone kind of puts on the board what they think contributed the biggest contributions to the success in turning around the product, and you kind of group them, you know, all the different, you know, text, if you will, into certain categories, and then everyone kind of puts their votes up, and this was the top 5 as far as the top 5 things that contributed to our success, as well as things to continue on to the next product and maybe even do better. I touched on the distributed ownership, the alignment, cross-functional teams. QA integration was a big one, getting them closer to those cross-functional teams. Also giving QA some ability to do, you know, complete bugs themselves, some senior QA, that kind of stuff. Inviting them into more and more of the meetings, the brainstorming. And one thing certainly going forward we want to do is when we start establishing pipelines on new stuff, we get QA very much involved at the early stages in pipelines. Playing the game is a huge one, right? We hear about that in a lot of different products, like play your game. Getting the context of knowing what your piece of, you know, art, your asset, your the story you're doing, where the gameplay sits. The cross-functional teams certainly help with that. Playing the game, of course, helps with that. And how do you, when everyone's got a bunch of stuff and they're very passionate about their work and they want to put all their time into their craft, and telling them to take a step away and like play it sometimes is challenging, even though everyone kind of knows the benefit of it. And so we blocked out 3 days every milestone. We had a milestone was usually 2 sprints of 3 weeks. We blocked out 3 days, no tasks on the board. We ran contests, gave prizes. We set up new terminals, like out near the cantina, the kitchen. People could just sit down. We made events of it. And I think this, and as the team thinks, that it helped quite a bit. Now, this is the team's top 5, and it's certainly correct. I agree with it. I think there's kind of a little bit of a deeper level, because you can have all of these kind of systemic changes, these techniques, but I think there was something more to it on how we were able to turn this around. I think a big part was we shared a purpose, right? I talked about the atmosphere a bit at the beginning. We were all in the trenches together. There was, it felt like we were against the odds, right? The other thing is that we were all very dedicated and willing to change. Like, going through a rough launch is, of course, humbling. And so we were all in a kind of disposition, a mentality that we're like, okay, all right, obviously some things we didn't do right. What do we need to do to change? And so that willingness to change, all this together to me was like, there was a combined purpose. And I think this is a quintessential part of us being able to turn it around. Trust. So trusting each other's abilities, their talents. I think the trusting in the IP, the belief in the IP and the potential that it had, it was just kind of there in the air. And everyone, I mean, this one's hard to kind of frame, but maybe with an anecdote. Like, when you're not able to do something or you're struggling with something, and raising your hand for help is a big kind of trust beat. And I saw that happening a lot. And so from my perspective, just seeing how much the team trusted each other to do a good job and gave the benefit of the doubt, because game development's tough. And so when people give the benefit of the doubt to each other and trust doing a good job, that in the atmosphere, I think, was a big part of us being able to turn it around. Now, talent kind of goes without saying to some extent. You want to make a good product, you want to make a good game, a good really anything, you got to have a talented team. And there was a bountiful talent at CD PROJEKT RED on the project. I was quite privileged to work with so many talented people. In addition to that, though, I think there was just something to a kind of unique composition of the talent, a chemistry. There was a chemistry as we were approaching this. We all kind of saw the values and kind of appreciated the same things in games, and that was our passions, our interests, and the things we wanted to learn about. And that was also just in the air, and I think that's a huge part of it. And then finally, players, because we talk about the cross-functional teams, we talk about the alignment, the setting up that format. We talk about the, going through it in the trenches together. All of this stuff might lend yourself to like great team health reports, great, kind of retrospectives and stuff like that. But of course, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't really matter if you're not making something that the players want and if the players aren't there. So the players kind of giving us that, believing in us and trusting in us as well, and kind of sticking with us and giving us a second chance, so to speak, was huge. It was huge. And yeah, so I think players, we can't forget about that, and getting the players what they want is a very important part of this. And that's it. A quick 20-minute brief on it. Thank you.